Hey, everybody, this is Brian Smith, your host of Grief to Growth, and I'm back with another episode. And today I've got with me Mary Terhune. And Mary is a Hay House author, a Hay House published author. I'm going to read her bio and then we'll get started with the interview. As I said, she's a Hay House published author of the book Out of the Blue, True Life Experiences of Awakening, Revelation, and Transformation. Mary has been involved in the healing arts for over 40 years as as a registered nurse, homeopathic educator, therapeutic massage practitioner, and Reiki master. Mary has a degree in sociology and gives lectures and workshops in spiritual awakening, divinity, self-realization, and death based on her powerful awakening and mystical experiences over 30 years. Her spontaneous spiritual awakening began during a life crisis where she received 7 revelations from the spiritual master Jesus, who ignited the Kundalini and energy centers in her body, known as chakras, that transformed her conscious awareness, changing her life forever. 4 years later, after meeting a monk who had become her teacher, she had a profound experience of self-realization that brought her the message that divinity is humankind's natural state, and it's one that we need to reclaim. The message delivered to her at that time was, here is your divinity, the divinity that awaits all mankind. So with that, I'm gonna cut the bio short there, Mary. I'm gonna let you tell your story, but I want to introduce Mary Terhune.
Hi, Brian. Nice to be with you.
Mary, it's great to have you here. I appreciate you doing the interview. I have read your book and I found it fascinating. I'm not sure exactly where to start, so I'll just let you tell your story from wherever you think is good to start.
Yeah, well, as you can see, the world is going through a big transformation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this was sort of like the transformation that I had many years ago in the 80s when I went through a big life crisis. And the crisis was so dramatic. You know, before that, I knew nothing about meditation, spiritual paths.
Mm-hmm.
I had no understanding whatsoever. I was just living my life. You could say I was living in the egoic dream
Mm-hmm.
of duality, where things were right and wrong or good or bad, blame and shame, that whole game. And at one point in my life, I lost everything that I had worked for. I lost all my retirement money. It was through an experience with other people. And through that experience, I had a daughter at that time who was about 11. And I really blamed myself for losing my investment. And it was a sizable amount, and it would be my retirement fund.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was thrown into tremendous debt and such fear and anxiety that I could no longer contain this ongoing story in my mind that I was a loser. How could I do this? What's wrong with me? Why didn't I get a lawyer? All these conversations. And it was reached such a point. I was in such agony. I called out to God that I didn't really believe in and said, just let me die because I can't deal with this anymore. I cannot hold this grief anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I was sobbing uncontrollably like I'd never cried before. And at that point, when I called out, all of a sudden, my mind stopped. I couldn't think one more bad thought. It just absolutely stopped. And what happened was a space opened up. Now, of course, I'm speaking about this now with this understanding, but at the time, I didn't understand. So this space opened up. And as soon as that space opened up, this light entered my living room through the window. And this peace came over me. And it said, you can't blame her. She didn't know. And all of a sudden, I found myself in this very peaceful state. And he said to me, I realized then it was a spiritual master, and then I realized it was the Master Jesus, who was very much alive, but not like anything I was taught in the Catholic Church.
Oh, really?
Not that story.
Yeah.
This was a spiritual master, and he didn't belong to any religion. He belonged to the world. To like all of us, we all belong to the world, and he discovered that divinity in himself, and that was his message. And the first thing he spoke to me about was forgiveness. he gave me an experience of forgiveness. Then he went on to speak 6 other revelations, but it first began with forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, now do you see that true forgiveness is self-forgiveness?
Hmm.
And he explained, it was sort of like a download of information. When the light comes in, it has all this information and knowledge, and you're downloaded with it very, very fast. And it's beyond the mind, and you just have an understanding. You're downloaded with understandings. And he said, true forgiveness is self-forgiveness. In other words, you come into this life, you're playing in this realm, you take it on a separate identity. There's certain situations you have to go through. And when you have no remembrance of your true nature as being divine, you go through all of this until one day you wake up.
Yeah.
And you have to forgive yourself for being not awake.
Yeah.
Because that's why he said, you have to forgive her. She didn't know. But once you walk through that door, now you do know. And then you have to integrate that awakening and that knowledge. And that takes time, because all of these years we've lived out of egoic structure.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to fall back into the blame game.
Mm-hmm.
And he went on to explain, it was 7 revelations, and I wrote them down so I remember them.
Yeah.
They're in the book, but just to
Mm-hmm.
give you the order.
Yeah, please.
He spoke about forgiveness, then he spoke about judgment, that there is no other. So when you're judging, coming from right and wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you're judging yourself. You're projecting a
Mm-hmm.
judgment. You're playing the game of right and wrong versus one's divine nature. And they spoke about the Bible. He said, now do you understand how they misuse my words in the Bible? And he had tremendous sorrow, and I felt his sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
He spoke about weight and emotions and how they're connected, that everything begins in an energy of thought and mind, and then it trickles down into the physical.
Mm-hmm.
He spoke about disease, which was the same thing. He spoke about aging. Aging is from what we create in our mind,
Mm-hmm.
which causes friction in our being and doesn't allow the spiritual energy to flow.
Mm-hmm.
And he spoke about the ego,
Yeah.
which I came to really understand was a case of mistaken identity, that we believe we're separate, that
Mm-hmm.
we're each separate, we're separate from each other, and therefore we create other, which
Yeah.
is all about duality and blame and shame. And it went on and on. I mean, he gave me, then he awakened my Kundalini energy. I mean, I had heard vaguely about the chakras,
Mm-hmm.
but now he awakened that in me, and I felt all the energy, my chakras going around in circles. And I went, oh, that's what they're talking about. It's real. And then he did something where he awakened the third eye. He removed a veil from my third eye. I felt it. It was like a literal unveiling.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I had no understanding, no underpinning. This had never happened before.
Mm-hmm.
What is this new world? But I knew it was real. It was more real than what I was living, which I thought was real.
Right.
But that was a dream of the ego and being not awake. And the real was this divine light that seemed to be all around me and in me. At that time, I did not understand what that really was. And at the end of all of this, there were many, many things that happened that I go into the book.
Yeah.
He awakened this profound love that I never touched before, never knew existed before. And when all of this ended, which I think went on for, I don't know, a half hour, who knows, because it was timeless.
Yeah.
And at some point he withdrew when he finished his speaking to me. I was able to get up from the couch. Oh, one of the things that he said was, and he gave me an experience of this, he said, it is easier, now do you see, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man. to enter the kingdom of God.
Hmm.
And he gave me the experience that this is the eye of the needle right here.
Oh, okay.
And there's a passport agent here of divinity
Hmm.
that if you have taken care of and released all the egoic structure here, all that blame game, at some point you can pass through the eye of a needle into the kingdom here, which
Hmm.
sits here,
Mm-hmm.
of your divine nature, that it
Wow.
rests here. And by rich man, he went, one who is burdened with materialism,
Right.
the way you think that this is just a material world and, I'm going to get what I can and I don't care about you.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of attitude, or rich in pride, or rich in, that's in that way. And I had never really, to get that full understanding, it was so deep and so profound.
Yeah, because we've always think of when we say the rich man is like that's the guy that's got a lot of money, right? But you're saying it's the attachment.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's believing that that's all there is.
Mm-hmm.
Being burdened with your material mind
Mm-hmm.
in all of this, and everything is duality, and blaming others and getting for yourself and agreed, and believing in there's not enough,
Yeah.
and that's a lie. There's
Wow.
plenty. There's more than plenty for everyone to have housing, food, a job, love, all the things that help support us to be in a physical body on this earth.
Yeah.
There's more than enough.
Well, let's talk about that. There's more than enough. Why do we feel like there's not? Why do we feel like we have to compete for everything? And
Because we're living in an egoic structure.
okay.
Yeah, because we believe in the duality, that there is an other. And
Mm-hmm.
imagine having, this is an experience. I could never have come to this knowledge without an experience,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't come from the mind, and you can't free yourself from the ego from inside the ego.
Mm-hmm.
You need an external force called divine awakening to come in to break open that structure.
Wow. Okay.
And up until now, humanity has lived only in that structure, that very small structure, in a very small way.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't been able to break through that veil of separation that rests down here. But once we have an awakening, once the Kundalini, or the spiritual energy, is awakened within us, I once was blind, but now I see.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I went out to the backyard, after he left and withdrew his energy, I went out to the backyard to get a breath of fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
And when I opened the door, I was shocked by what I saw, because all I saw was light everywhere. Light, all these little photonic packets of light that created the trees and the earth and the little squirrel that was running by and the flowers. So
Yeah.
I saw the reality that exists, that you can only enter into when you have this experience of your divine nature. So
I think that's really interesting when you say that. And I remember reading that in the book, and I thought about when people have near-death experiences, that's the way to describe what we call the other side.
yes,
And I wonder sometimes, it's like, is that what our world really looks like, and we just can't see it?
yes,
Wow.
that's correct. We can't see it in each other. When you look into someone's eyes, you're literally looking into the light of God.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't know it. And
Yeah.
once you know it, you can't deny it, because you walk through this door of understanding and you are transformed.
Yeah.
You're transfigured. It's an inner revelation that creates a revolution in you.
Yeah.
And you no longer, you may fall back into, that way of thinking. So, but you snap out of it very quickly, because you're not happy, and you realize, wait a minute, remember who you are.
Yeah. But you had this experience and you saw the world that way for a while, but then you don't see the world that way anymore. It fades, right?
No, because
yeah.
what happened to me next, and I was in this love where I loved everybody and everything, and all I saw was love. And
I'm reading this, I'm like, this is the way I want to live all the time.
this went on day after day after
Yeah.
day. to the point where I could no longer function at work because all I was in this bliss, it was sort of like an Eckhart Tolle moment.
Mm.
Just like he said, he couldn't function anymore. All he could do was sit on a bench and watch this amazing display from this place of presence.
Right.
And here I was in this, not understanding what this was, but knowing it was the realest of the real, and that it was our true nature,
Mm-hmm.
without having a full understanding of what it was. And here I was going to work. I was working in research administration at Beth Israel Hospital here in Boston. And I was supposed to work with these figures and statistics. I couldn't make sense of it. I would just sit at the desk in this blissful state. At some point, I sort of...
Well, this brings up a question that I asked you for some questions before
Right.
the interview, and you brought up a question that I've always had with this: do we need an ego? Because
No.
well, it's interesting because in this, I hear people say we don't need an ego, but you were saying when you became kind of egoless, when you saw beyond that, you couldn't function in the world.
That's because I didn't understand what was going on.
Okay.
And I
Explain that
couldn't
to me.
anchor it.
Okay.
I didn't know how to anchor it. There was no anchoring. And then a few years later, I met a monk
Oh.
who initiated me into this deeper understanding. And then that's when I began to have a deeper understanding of what was going on. And very shortly after that, I had a full-blown experience of self-realization, where I was, where all the Kundalini energy came up, where the story of our life is written from here down, and it's written in the Kundalini chakras, and all the issues of our lives that we have to deal with, all the karmic issues, everything that we have to deal with. When we've worked through all of that and are choosing, you want to choose something more than that. Mm-hmm. This is when this initiation happens and it becomes alive. And then once it reaches here, the story, it's like a storybook that rolls up. It reaches here, and right here, the eye of the needle, where divine permission is given to enter the kingdom here. And I had the experience. What happened was the words were Sanskrit. They were Aham Brahmashmi. I am Brahman, and all this is my creation. So who is there to hate?
Wow.
And at that moment when I had that, I was outside and I looked up above this building, and there was Jesus rising in a cloud like this with his arms up. And I thought, how strange. Why is he here? Oh, I'm ascending as well, but ascending from here, ego, into the ascension of Vaikuntha, the heaven within, to bring heaven on earth. And this is the great shift that humanity is calling forth from inside themselves. In other words, consciousness wants to know itself.
Okay.
And so the world that we created out of egoic structure of lack and duality can no longer hold this energy that wants to be known within us. And it's happening on an individual level, and it's happening outside because it's time to wake up from this limited egoic structure. And so it did take me time to assimilate all of this, to really understand it.
Right.
But I knew it was absolute, utter truth, and it has never left me. The understanding of it has never left me. It's only deepened over time. It's only deepened. And so now I function quite well. Actually, you function your best when you are functioning as in that knowledge and choosing moment to moment. Eckhart says, be in the now. That's the now. And if the mind has got a story going, interrupt the story and be in the present, be in the moment, between the words, between words. There's a space that's alive. That space is your divinity. In silence, God is known. Your divinity as God is known. In silence.
Wow.
Because speech can't capture it. It can only point to it.
Right. Right. So, so the self-realization that you just spoke of, is this what happened when we were having the meditation and you saw the monk and were taken out of your body?
I didn't go out of my body. I went into my consciousness.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
very different.
Yeah. Explain that to me.
Yes, because there's an awakening that happens. In other
Okay.
words, this energy that's in us awakens, and it's like all the veils are removed. So
Mm-hmm.
they call these veils Maya. All the
Mm-hmm.
veils are removed, and
Mm-hmm.
then you can see, because when that happened, again, what happened? I saw the photonic packets of light, and people. This time I was outside, so other people around, and I saw their soul hovering over them in this light halo right here, and it filtered down like a Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, do they know that they're God? Because here I am in this state. Don't they know they're God? No, they're caught in the thought thinking process of thinking they're small, and they're separate, and
Yeah.
so the thing that I was delivered from immediately was fear. There was no fear. There was only this profound love. That's nature was love. It was not transactional love. It was love because its nature was love. This is our nature, and it's beyond transactional, and it's beyond egoic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the huge leap in consciousness we are making.
Yeah,
And
it's interesting the phrase you just used there that said, "Don't they know they are God?" And I think about what Jesus said when when he was killed for people saying he claimed he was God. And I hear a lot of people who've had spiritual transformative experiences, people that have had near death experiences. They'll say that I'm God, and people want to kill them too. So, coming from your Catholic background and saying something like that, how would you describe that to someone that would say, well, you're not really God, and get back into it? So, sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty, but we're back. And I was just
yeah,
asking Mary, because you mentioned the fact that you looked around at people, you're having self-realization,
yes,
and you said, don't they know that they are God?
yes,
And I've heard other people that have had near-death experiences, spiritual transformative experiences, say things like that we are God.
yes.
And people consider that to be a blasphemous statement. I mean, Jesus made that claim and he was killed for it. So how would you respond to that?
Well, the ego wants to kill you for saying that because it likes to have, full reign of duality, or, so it kind of confronts our egoic structure. But the true reality is, when you experience it, that there's that true underlying reality of everything is Brahman, or God,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever you want to call it, this divine nature. And it is our nature. It's everyone's nature. It's not exclusive. It's inclusive. It
Mm-hmm.
includes everyone. And that's a real affront to the egoic structure, that this egoic structure that is not eternal. It's a very, it is just a structure in our mind, and we have learned to operate as separate identities,
Mm-hmm.
and it's based in fear. It's fear and separation. So anytime that it's confronted, it's a lot of fear, because it knows its days are numbered, and we're numbering it. We're doing it. Humanity is calling forth its divinity,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't have two masters running the show. You can't have the ego running the show and your divine nature running the show. One has to go. And that's our free will. We can choose. We have our free will to choose if
Mm-hmm.
we want to live in that suffering of egoic structure of fear, or do we want to choose our divine nature? But you can't have both, because it falls. And you can see this is the fall that's happening now, because we're calling forward our divine nature.
Okay.
And you can call it, sometimes it's referred to as Brahman Vidya, the supreme science
Mm-hmm.
of the ultimate reality, or awareness, or presence, whatever you want to call it. It belongs to everyone equally. It's beyond all of our religions. You can have religions, but
Mm-hmm.
it has to be inclusive for everybody. Practice as you wish your divine nature. That's our free will to do that. But it's all one within everyone.
Yeah. So, what do you think about what's going on with the world right now? Because depending on your point of view, a lot of people think everything's kind of falling apart. Social structures seem to be falling apart.
Yes.
Things are falling. And it's interesting because when we first started this conversation, you talked about how when you came to this realization the first time that Master Jesus came to you, you were at a low point. I mean, you were like,
Yeah.
can't do this anymore. So
Yeah.
you think two things maybe in parallel?
Yes, it is exactly. And this is why I'm speaking. It took me 30 years to write this book.
Mm-hmm.
I had to integrate it and live it.
Mm-hmm.
And in those 30 years, I continued having mystical experiences. I've had many, 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 many that I
Mm-hmm.
could not possibly put in the book, and I'd still be writing it.
Mm-hmm.
But Wayne Dyer, as you know, Wayne Dyer wanted me to write this. He wanted me to re-edit my first version of this and to have
Mm-hmm.
Hay House publish it. And that's how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And Wayne, unfortunately, we lost him 3 months before the book came out.
Yeah.
He passed in August, and then the book came out in November. But and he wrote, on the back of the book that my description of self-realization was the best that he's ever read in over 30 years. And that's what prompted him to contact me
Yeah.
and to come. And so, and there's a wonderful, by the way, on my website, maryterhune.com,
Mm-hmm.
maryterhune.com, right on the first page, there's the audio of Wayne reading my chapter on self-realization, my description of what happened to me.
Yeah.
And it was captured in an audio. So we have that. So that's like the gift that Wayne left behind, left here
Yeah.
for us, as
Yeah.
well as his other teachings and books and everything. But yeah.
Well, I like the way you put that. We've got this. We feel like we're separate, but there's this underlying consciousness, if you want to use that word, that kind of that permeates and actually supports all of reality. And I'm just learning a little bit about this now. And I'm reading a book by a guy. It's called Idealism: The Idea That Consciousness is everything that there is, and the physical rises out of consciousness,
Yes.
as opposed to science has it exactly backwards.
Yes.
That we're material, everything's material, and consciousness is either an illusion, it doesn't really exist because they realize it really can't come out of the material, or they'll say, well, consciousness is a separate thing that arises out of the material, which doesn't really make any sense either. But that's kind of the thing that's what we're operating from.
Yes, and consciousness precedes matter.
Right.
That's what I saw. I mean, not only did I see it once, I saw it many times.
Yeah.
The consciousness precedes matter. It cannot die. It was never born and it can never die. Neither can we, because that's what we're made of. And it was put in this physical material body to express itself. So you could say that there's only God and God is expressing itself.
Mm-hmm.
But when I use the word God, people get all kind of tied in the knot about it because the ego has kind of taken it over and made it and used it as a weapon.
Yeah.
It's our divine nature. You want to call it divine nature. You want to call it Brahman.
Yeah, the word God is so charged. I was talking to a near-death experiencer who's a friend of mine, and she said I use the word God, and people get upset about it in the near-death community. She was saying she felt that anyway. But it's consciousness, it's source.
Yes, it's source, it's consciousness, and it's an experience. One cannot get this from philosophical books.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be an experience. Can you call it forth? Yes. You can call it forth. You can say things. You can remind yourself when you're going into a story in your mind about how you think things are.
Mm-hmm.
Just stop for a moment. Say, I am that I am. I am that I am. And that's calling forth this divine consciousness that you truly are.
Mm-hmm.
I am that I am. A lot of people, they use that, a lot of people use Jesus and they say that he said, I am the way. But what was left out of that was I am is the way. Very different.
Yeah.
I am is the way. I am that I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I had the full experience of self-realization. And the only reason I can speak of this with any authority is that I was given it. And it didn't, it came from our divine nature, this oneness. And it was Aham Brahmashmi, I am Brahman. And all this is my creation. So that it's And it's difficult for the mind to conceive this because you always think in terms of other, something outside you. And when God is mentioned, it's, right away, there's a separation.
Yeah.
There's God and there's me. No,
Yeah.
there's no me. There's no me. There's no individual me. That's a dream of the egoic separation. Now we're moving into the true reality of eternity, of our eternal nature that can't die. So that when your body drops from this world, you leave it and go on.
Mm-hmm.
There's no end of consciousness. There's just a continual evolution of it. And we are
Yes.
in an evolution revolution. And that's why the structures are falling apart, because this energy, this higher energy that we are all calling forth, whether aware of it or not, is divine in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to therefore construct from love,
Okay.
not hate and fear. And I'm talking about a love that's not transactional. I'm talking about a love that's its nature is to be in love without fear. And people are beginning to make that, because we're suffering in this duality. We're suffering in this hate. We're suffering in it. We're killing ourselves.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Quite literally. So we're right on the brink of this evolution. And, the astrologers are talking about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, I was reading a friend of mine, and she wrote that, I just want to kind of look at my notes. She said, Jupiter and Saturn have been in earth signs for like eons. And that means very material. Earth is material.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the end of this year, in December, Jupiter and Saturn is moving into Aquarius, which is an air sign, which means spirit, consciousness. So we're moving from this material egoic structures into creating from this divine nature that's beyond this material world.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going into divine. So that consciousness precedes matter. So we're going to be creating more from this experience. It's not just philosophical. It's the inner experience that we're going through.
Yeah.
It's literally is a transfiguration inside of ourselves. And there's a war going on inside ourselves. Which am I going to choose? Which wolf will I feed?
Yeah.
The wolf of the ego and separation and fear and hate my brothers and sisters? Or am I going to feed the wolf of my divinity and reclaim my true nature and everyone's true nature? And you can see it in the light of, when you look into baby's eyes,
Mm-hmm.
you can see the light of God there.
Yeah.
There's no self there at that time.
Right.
That's
right.
why you love to look at a baby, because they're not caught yet in that self. They're just divine.
Yeah.
You look at little puppies, the same thing. You look in nature. That's our divinity, and we're reclaiming it inside of ourselves. It's a big inner war that's going on inside ourselves. This is the war, and we're in this war moment to moment. Are we choosing being in presence
Mm-hmm.
in this moment? Do we hold that door open for the next person coming through, or do we just shut it?
So is there a purpose to us, incarnating and coming here and forgetting who we are and feeling this separation?
Well, that was part of the evolution of humanity on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's time to evolve
Okay.
into bringing heaven on earth.
Okay.
Heaven, Vaikuntha, on earth. We have an earth chakra right at the bottom of our spine.
Mm-hmm.
That's earth. This is heaven.
Hmm.
So all of this is rising up and meeting heaven to bring it on earth, to be expressed externally in ways we haven't even imagined yet as we awakened,
So as we're having this conversation, and I was looking at some of the questions you sent me. You said, what is consciousness? Is it a living divine force? And why are we talking so much about it now? And I was listening to a podcast this morning, and the person was saying, I think we're going to get sick of the word consciousness because we're all talking about consciousness now. But as you said, it may just be a different way of talking about God. But as soon as we say God, we separate.
Yes.
God is this big thing that's outside of me, and I'm this little thing that just isn't,
which is very egoic. I'm this little nothing.
Yeah.
And therefore you create out of that. Oh boy. look what we've done,
Yeah. So what is your experience of consciousness? Is it a living divine force? What is consciousness?
Yes, it's the living divine force in us that animates and informs our body. It
Hmm.
allows it to move, that allows our ability to see, to speak. And when it's no longer involved in this process here, then it leaves. So like smoke going up a chimney, out it
Yeah.
goes off to another. It's beyond time and space. Consciousness is this, and it's not just a word; it's an experience. You have to experience it. The mind cannot conceive it.
Hmm.
Because when it happened to me, the light that exploded within me and the energy that came out of my heart and opened it in this flowing ocean of divinity was omniscient.
Yeah.
It was staggering. And I was overtaken with my true nature, hardly believing that this is what's inside of humanity. Here is your divinity. I was given it. Here is your divinity, the divinity that awaits all mankind. And I'm going to read the rest of that quote.
Yeah, please.
What happened? Here is your divinity, the divinity that awaits all mankind. Your soul wants full expression now. This is the presence. This is the living presence. This is living. This is real.
Wow.
That's what was given to me on that day
So
as an experience.
so how do we experience self-realization? You said it can't be conceived by the mind. So if I want this, you had some truly amazing experiences, and they
Yeah.
are in the book. And I do recommend people get the book because we're not doing them justice in the interview here. But how do I experience self-realization?
Same way I would. It's that same love. It's not different.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the same in everybody. You see, it's an equal measure.
Mm-hmm.
There's no more. You get more and I get a little bit more. It's
Yeah.
all one. You'll experience it the same way when your heart opens. Love. But I'm talking about way love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beyond transactional and beyond the suffering ego. And it's astonishing when you experience it because it's like, oh my God, this is inside. This is in us. What?
Yeah.
How is this possible? But all the masters speak to it.
Yes, they do.
They all speak to it, no matter which master it is. They all speak to the same light, and it's magnificent. It's outrageous. It's inconceivable, and it's omniscient, and it's
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And imagine, as we each reclaim this in ourselves, imagine creating from that space. And we're moving there. We're moving more to air, lighter, light. Look at the internet. I didn't have this growing up. Cell phones. I mean, this is a reflection of what I'm talking about in terms of bringing it into the material. So who knows what new things are on the horizon here, what new creations, what new structures we'll create, and how we will create them when we reclaim this. But in order to reclaim this, you can't function from egoic.
Mm.
It will not be allowed. Just like it's the eye of the needle.
Yeah. So
It's
we've
harder for this. It cannot enter this. It's
okay.
not allowed. It's a failsafe.
Hmm. So a lot of my listeners have experienced tragedy in their life,
Yes.
experienced death, and death is a difficult subject, but
Yes.
it's one that we don't shy away from here. So I know you had an experience with death during a meditation, and you were shown some things. So talk to me about what that was like.
Yes, I was actually working at MIT at the time in the Space Center, and every lunch hour I would take that time to meditate, because by that time I had found a teacher, and I understood that in order to continually make contact with my true self to make those breakthroughs, I really needed to meditate and give time to that. And so it was during the winter time, and so I was sitting inside now. Usually I was sitting outside, and I was sitting on a bench in the engineering building at MIT, and it was these big glass windows that faced Massachusetts Avenue. And I would often bring spiritual material with me to read and then meditate on it. And so I was reading a book about this saint that had passed. And I thought, that's too bad. I'll never get to meet him on this earth plane, at least. Oh,
Right.
what a shame, And so I closed my eyes to meditate. And where I was meditating was the lobby of the engineering building. So there's this revolving door where students would come through and go out as a pass-through. And I'm sitting there to the side, leaning against the wall. My eyes are closed. I'm meditating. And I hear this voice that's just like you talking to me that says, "Are you ready?" And I thought, oh, that's some student bothering me. They see I'm meditating and they're playing around.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just ignored it. And then I hear again, "Are you ready?" And all of a sudden, with my eyes closed, I see this monk all in red, dressed in red robes, coming towards me. And I'm like, oh my God, people have talked about these real experiences in meditation. I had no idea it's real.
Mm-hmm.
And so he walked towards me. And when he walked towards me, he turned into the Milky Way, the energy of the Milky Way. And he entered my solar plexus right below my chest. And when he did, it set off this cacophony of divine noises, which involved a conch, the blowing of a conch, bells ringing, and the sound of wind like a tornado. Whoosh, and the bells are ringing and the conch is blowing, and all of a sudden I hear a locomotive going through, and I hear all this noise, and it's such a rack, and the energy inside me was so powerful. It was the energy, I didn't understand, it was the energy of divinity, God, this source in all of us. And it came up, and it was rising up and up, and the sounds were loud, and they were so loud, I thought my eardrums were going to burst.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it reached here, and I understood that I was about to leave my body, that this energy was about to, and I thought, oh, I'm going to die. But I wasn't afraid. And I had the thought, well, what about my daughter? I have a daughter. And I heard, don't worry. Oh, okay, I won't worry. And then I was taken out. And like 2 seconds later, there I was standing in front of two windows of light, a rectangular window, one over the other. And what poured from these windows was that divine love, that divine, magnetic, overpowering, world-creating love that we, of course, are. Yeah. But this divine love that was so powerful that it was magnetic, and I wanted to go into it. And as my being, my consciousness light being, went to move towards it, to go, I heard this little voice that says, what about your daughter? But I couldn't resist this magnetic love. There was no resistance. I had to go to it. As I went to move towards it, the monk was there, and his energy touched my energy, and he goes, not yet. And I understood I had to go back to wherever I was, but I had no memory of where I was because I was completely all me. I could see, think, hear. I was completely me,
right?
All of its fullness, and feeling quite happy. And I was told I had to go back, and I'm like, wait, how? Where? And I looked down, and I see this silver cord just floating through the air, this very thin silver cord of light. And it was attached to my energy body. And I was told that to follow that light, follow the cord back to wherever you were going. And so it took all my energy, it took every ounce of my energy to concentrate on. And as I went to follow that cord from this vast darkness, all of a sudden, whoosh, this vastness opened up, and I saw our solar system. And I started flying through the solar system, one planet to the other, and I wonder what planet I'm going to. Oh, I'm going to planet Earth. And so I'm following this cord, and I go, oh, it's like a zoom, the zoom map? Like that. Oh, I'm going to planet Earth. Oh, I'm going to North America, zooming down further. Oh, I'm going to Massachusetts, zooming down further. Oh, I'm going to MIT. And all of a sudden, I find myself floating on the top of the ceiling of the electrical engineering building, looking down at a body that's sitting meditating. And I thought, oh, I have to go into that body. I had no connection with that body. I wasn't male or female. I was just consciousness,
Hmm.
pure being, pure light, in all of its fullness, noticing everything, seeing everything, hearing everything, knowing everything. And I had to go back into that body. I called it that body.
Mm-hmm.
And as I go down, I entered through the top of the head the way I went out. And as the energy went in, my soul energy or consciousness, divinity, whatever you want to, went in, the whole body jumped literally like this.
Hmm.
This is awful. God, it was like a tight shoe. Oh my God, this is terrible. I have to deal with this mind. I have to deal with these issues. Oh no. I was not happy.
Wow.
And as I had that thought, the monk all of a sudden appears in front of me and he goes, you see, the veil is very thin between here and there, very thin. And he disappears. And I am left sitting on the bench, meditating in the electrical engineering building as I face the reality of having to be back in this body to deal
Interesting.
with
Wow.
these issues and these issues that are just temporary but instructive for me to come to my divinity and express it in the earth and to deal with whatever it is I have to deal with, which is a divine mystery.
Yeah.
It is a divine mystery.
Yeah.
And I realized at that moment, wait a minute, if I can't die, because I realized that's what that was, I'm just leaving the body. Wait a minute, if I can't die, then I can't have the opposite. I can't be born. Wait a minute, the whole thing's an illusion. Oh my God. It was that sort of, when you're giving these experiences, you're downloaded with these understandings. And I understood that we are never born, you never die, you always are eternal. So, and that experience of death happened 3 months after. That was my experience of self-realization happened in July, and this happened in October.
Okay.
So one followed the other. So to give me a complete understanding of being here on this earth in this being, to continue my mystical education, so to speak, so that and I didn't know at some point that I would be speaking about these things.
Yeah.
People, but I had to be given a complete experience so that I could speak, because it would come through me with truth.
Yeah.
And of it, and I would be speaking to people who already know this, because we already know this in ourselves. And when I speak to what we know inside of each of us, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, that sort of thing. Usually,
yeah. People start to recognize it. It's more of I think a remembrance than it is learning.
Perfect word, remembrance.
Yeah.
Remember who you are.
What you described sounds. You did, as far as we know, your body didn't stop functioning, but it sounds exactly like a near-death experience. And
yes, and the reason it didn't stop was because the cord wasn't cut.
Okay, yeah. But I was talking to someone the other day, and I deal with a lot of parents who have lost children.
Yeah.
And I was there was a near-death experience that had been on my show, and he had said he made a choice to come back. And she said, well, if my son passed, then obviously he wasn't given a choice, because if he had been given a choice, he would have come back to me. And I think a lot of us want to believe that. But it's interesting when I hear you describe this, you thought about your daughter, but you knew everything would be okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And if you don't come back, that means you're complete, or at least for this incarnation.
Right.
And we don't, when we're finished, when we're complete, whenever we've completed everything, which can take thousands of years, we don't come back we graduate to something else. There's more than earth. There's more to heaven and earth, Horatio, than is dreamt of in your philosophy, right?
Right.
There's more. This consciousness continues to evolve. in a joyful bliss and never ending expression. And this is why it's so precious. Our life is precious here to remember who we are and allow us to continue to evolve. And we,
And you just touched on something else there again. Another subject is pretty controversial: reincarnation. So you say we do come back more than once.
Yeah. We're eternal in nature, so you keep coming back, I mean, after I had all these awakening experiences, I did have memories of past lives. So, but but everybody has them, so that's not the important part. That's just a sidebar. That's a sidebar.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Because we're eternal in nature. So it's special on earth because we get to express the eternal nature in these physical forms.
Right.
To make visual in a certain, through these senses, to experience what it's like to eat chocolate ice cream. What is it like to love another person? What is it like to have a loving partner who's on this evolutionary road with me? What's that like?
Yeah.
What's it like to smell a flower? What's it like to hold a baby?
Yeah, it's funny you say this. I think of my daughter who passed. She was 15 when she passed, but I would say to her, Shana, you haven't fully incarnated. You don't seem to really understand the rules of Earth, like gravity and things like that, and exercise, and you can't eat sugar all the time. But she was just like full out, like, I want to experience this. What's it like? She'd say, I want to feel. What's it like to have a broken leg? I'm like, Shana, we really don't want to, experience that, right? But when she had to get blood drawn, it's like, what's it? So that's just was like her nature was just like, what's this like? Just really fully embracing life.
Right. And so, I realized in that first awakening with the Master Jesus, when I went out to the backyard and saw this light, not only was it light, but the experience of that light was that light contained a profound love that was so powerful. I burst into tears and I said, oh my God, this is paradise, but we've made it into something else.
Yeah. Do you think we can sing like that again while we're on Earth? I mean,
this is why we're here. Okay. Brian.
Yeah.
Pay attention. This is why we're here, Brian. This is why I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
To remember each other, to remind each other, to be with each other, to support each other through the veil of egoic structure that wants to have us continuously forget. And in each moment, we need to continually remember.
Yeah.
That's why I am that I am is a nice little sort of mantra or meme that you can take with you and you're getting caught up in your mind and what the story of your mind and what you think somebody said and you didn't like, and just stop it and say, no, I am that I am. And so is everyone. And the more you do that, the more it shows up in your world. It's just like how you create anything, right? You create it from your mental thought. So imagine creating I am that I am in you. And then what talents we have that we bring it out and express it. This is an abundant, beyond words. There's more than enough of everything for everyone. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Yeah. I love that message. Well, Mary, it's been really wonderful having you on. I appreciate you putting up with the technical difficulties we've had and some scheduling things.
My pleasure.
I want to go over your book again and how people can contact you. So the book is.
Let me show you. Can I show you here?
Yes, Out of the Blue: True Life Experiences of Awakening, Revelation, and Transformation, and it's by Mary Terhune. It's Terhune, and Mary's website is maryterhune.com. I'll put all that in the show notes.
Right. It's on Amazon, so they can get it that way.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. I think so. You can get it there. I have read it. Actually, I read it twice. It's a great book. Mary has had a fascinating life. As I said, we just touched on some of her experiences here, so I do recommend you go out and get the book.
A pleasure to meet you, Brian. If we were closer, we'd go to lunch.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. Okay. Someday we'll do that.
Someday. Yeah.
All right. Well, Mary's great meeting you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too, Brian. A pleasure. Bye now.
Hey, thanks for watching. Before you leave, I'd like to just remind you, you can always find me at www.grieftogrowth.com. That's grief, numeral 2, growth.com. And you can schedule a free half-hour consultation if you'd like. Also, before you leave, please click on the like button here, click on subscribe, and click on the bell. By clicking like, YouTube will show the video to more people, and by subscribing and clicking the bell, you'll be notified when I release new material. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.